We have, as a community, spent $600 billion on developing AI tools, and we're looking for where's the ROI.
Welcome back to Revenue Remix, where I bring in founders and senior leaders who deserve a spotlight and they share their growth journey and share their valuable insights with you. I'm your host, Summer Poletti, founder and CRO of Rise of Us, where I help scaling orgs avoid wasting resources on growth strategies that fall flat. Joining me today is JD Miller. We met last year and I have been waiting for the right time to get him on the show. So, welcome, JD.
Thanks, Summer. It's great to finally be in the room with you.
I'm so when your request came up on the calendar, I was so happy that you remembered. So, JD, please give a quick one sentence intro. Who are you? What do you do? And why are you here?
So I'm a sales professional. I have been a CRO multiple times. I've been through 5 private equity transitions, and now I work in private equity, helping sales leaders. And I'm the author of a new book called the AI Handbook for Sales Professionals.
Yay, that's why you're here. You said AI and sales when we first met, and I was like, oh my God, yes, we need to explore that. So, for the audience, it takes a very special CRO to get invited on my show because usually I hold that seat. So, you have to write a book or have some exits or something like that. Bring something new. So, JD, we feature the whole person here. So, I did some research and I found something that stuck with me. You're a CRO of the year, private equity advisor, two-time author now, a licensed food sanitation manager who feeds over 12,000 homeless guests a year in Chicago. I mean, I need to know, like, do you ever sleep?
You've done some deep research there. Yeah, I mean, the common thread there is I get excited about things and I go really deep on them. And so, all the sales stuff there probably makes a lot of sense. I began as a seller, worked up through the ranks, got into private equity. So, kept working for companies that were bought and sold by private equity. Separately, I volunteered at a homeless shelter down the street that was supported by a church that could no longer manage the finances of it. So we spun it off as a nonprofit, a very private equity kind of thing to do, um, about
Sorry.
15 years ago, and we serve 12,000 guests a year. And because we're serving hot meals, someone needs to hold a restaurant license. And founder president, I'm the one who goes through the classes every 4 years to get certified in safe food handling.
Okay. I had not thought of that little piece. That's really interesting.
It's a
Well,
fantastic, and I'm in classes with a woman who's the dessert and chocolate pastry chef for the Four Seasons Hotel. And, I get to learn how to do sushi and safe handling things because it's a 40-hour class you've got to take every 4 years to recertify. I'm not doing sugar sculptures or chocolate sculptures or sushi for our homeless guests, but it still is a really fun skill to learn.
that is really cool. Wow. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. So let's get to the work part of the work. So your PhD is in organizational communication, not finance or sales or business strategy or management. I come from a Sandler background and people love to say that like it's outdated, but like I like it because Sandler's rooted in psychology and, communication is as well. So I think it absolutely holds up. So talk to me about how communication theory actually shows up in revenue work, because I have a hunch that the underlying thing is that everybody misses that, right? It's just psychology.
I think you're exactly right. So I earned my PhD in the late 90s. We were studying group communication and then really studying how that happens online and social networks and shared memory networks. And I really didn't want to get into sales, but it came kind of by accident. And I found that enterprise sales really is all about group decision making. So all of the same interpersonal dynamics we see in groups that are working on anything. It's negotiating politics with one another, looking for people's personal wins. Yes, you're here to do a specific task and hopefully select a software application that's going to get you big ROI, but it's not always the best application that wins if you haven't managed someone's personal politics or all the rest of that. So absolutely, communication scholars who know how to steer groups around, I think, make great salespeople in enterprise deals.
Yeah, it's funny because the best salesperson I think I've ever worked with was a PR major first.
Okay,
And but I think it really just boiled down to communications and the dynamics there. Interesting. And I
absolutely.
totally agree with you. We don't have time to get down that rabbit hole, but yes. So the companies you advise are like what my clients want to be when they grow up. So I want to work backwards and maybe give them some little nuggets of wisdom. If you're looking at a company trying to crack 50 million, maybe they're at 10 and they feel kind of stuck. What does their first real sales motion need to look like? And what do they have to get right that you almost never see done right?
So I think this actually comes back to the psychology thing again. I've got a dog who we're training to do all sorts of different things. And she has learned, I do this behavior, I get a reward. People who are in companies that have grown to $10 million, have been trained to do certain things. And often it's about, the strength of their personality or their personal charisma and their ability to be the superhero that goes in and talks to a prospect and they win the deal. And they've been rewarded for that over and over and over again.
Mhm.
What happens when you get to about $10 million is suddenly you can't be in every deal and you've got to have a sales team with two and three and five sellers. And so you have to train all of them to do exactly what you did. And it can be really hard for that sales leader to let go of that spotlight because I've been conditioned that I'm the smartest person in the room. I'm the only one who can talk to a customer and, the revenue and the commissions and all of that come. So I think really to crack that bridge and move from 10 to 50, it's about how can you shift your mindset to being a teacher instead of a doer. How can you document what you do and teach someone else to do it really well? And of course, this is where AI is going to come into play too, because we're teaching tools how to do some of this stuff. But how can you do that? And then also, how can you put yourself in the back seat where the first time I let Summer go out and pitch my product, she's not going to be very good at it. But if I keep jumping in and answering the questions for her, she's never going to learn. And so, getting comfortable with saying, I could be doing this better, but I'm going to let them make the mistake and then eventually you've got an army of folks who do things just as well or even better than you do.
Yes, that's so hard, by the way. That was I think you just touched on one of the hardest things I ever had to learn. Maybe walking was hard, I don't remember, but, like, yeah, because you know the answer and you're like, look, okay, I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna be quiet, and then we're gonna have a coaching conversation when we're done. Because yikes." Yeah, and you know what? What helped me was creating a mentor program on my teams to take the best seller and kind of clone them because that person does not want to have like a little mini me around tagging along with them forever. They want to like teach that person and get away from them. So my mentor program worked really well in ways that I wasn't always good at.
Yeah.
I'll say that.
Well, and I'll tell you, I'm working with a founder who put together a personal chat GPT
Mm,
and asked it to interview him about, how do I sell my product? And for 3 weeks, he was, when he had time, he was sort of engaging in this discussion of, he was doing voice to text. Tell me about your customers. Tell me about, why you won a deal. Tell me about why you
mhm,
lost a deal. And all of a sudden, the AI really learned how to be a mini him so that the
mm,
next sellers he came, who he hired, the next sellers that he hired were able to, go chat with the GPT and say, what would this person do in this situation? And what it allowed him to do is then spend his time focusing on the next part of the business. What's the new product? What's the new messaging? What's the new market we're going to break into? Because you got to 10 million because you were brilliant at something. And so now let's commoditize that and have you use your super special brain power to tackle the next big challenge that only you know how to address.
yeah, I love that. That's where the magic happens in a business is when the founder gets to get out of the revenue seat and really start focusing on that long-term vision and that strategic work. That's why I love what I do. That's really fun. So let's talk a little bit about the book. Because that's why you're here. So for the book, you assessed 158 AI tools and sales tool vendors. I didn't even know that many existed, but that's not a surprise. So what did you find? Because I'm guessing that the gap between the marketing and the reality is pretty wide. And I see a ton of people with shiny tool syndrome right now.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I didn't know there were going to be 158 when I started either. I began the process about 6 months ago, and I said, I really want to help sales leaders, maintain their relevance, and AI is coming along. So I started talking to a bunch of CROs and asking, what tools are you using? And then that launched me into a research project where, eventually I started, using AI itself to say, like, go find me all the tools that do these different parts of revenue. And I had 158 of them. And I thought, holy cow. One of the first things I learned is that people are AI washing everything. So, you
Yes.
know,
Oh, yeah,
I
if
grew
it
up
has a chat bot, it's AI powered, right? Yes.
exactly right. I started my sales career in the late 90s when we dot-commed everything. And we learned in that era that there were some things that should be a dot-com and some things that really shouldn't. And we're seeing the same thing today. I got an ad for an AI powered toothbrush. And, like maybe that's going to be important to someone, but that's probably not going to last. But we've taught people that if you put .ai after your name, suddenly you have all this valuation. And so there's this huge crowded marketplace and everyone's got this AI tool. I think much like the .com, most of the things probably aren't going to last. But there's going to be a handful of a couple of things that really do, and we're never going to imagine what life is like without it. And we saw that in the 90s, and I think we're going to see that, now in the 2020s and into the 30s with AI.
Yeah. No, I love that you brought it back to the dot com. Um, I was in a service role. That was my first, real job. So I saw that and this and this. And so I think that this is why it's good that Gen Xers are still in the workplace because we saw that. We can see this one coming. And when the AI bubble bursts, because it's a bubble and it will, sorry, uh, we will. Okay, I've seen this story before. I know what to do, you know. Okay,
But
so
also don't discount it because I remember early on saying I'm not going to get on Facebook because that's just for young kids. And eventually I learned that you've got to learn how to use social media because whether it is LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter or Blue Sky or whatever the next one is, you've got to be literate in that. And I think
for
that's the
sure.
same thing with AI is, there are
Yeah.
some folks my age who are like, it's a passing fad. No, it's not. It's going to
No,
be
it's
part of the
not.
future. Not all the things we say it's going to be, but some parts of it are going to survive. And so we've got to keep experimenting and trying.
100%. To any AI resistor, I will say it's already here, so stop. Yes, you have to learn how to use it. Are we going to see a die off of like all sorts of .ai or all these like there's going to be, Google rose to the top. So there's going to be some folks that, those orgs rise to the top, but AI is not going to go away because websites, I don't know, didn't go away.
Well, and what I learned too is we think about the start of AI in November of 22 when ChatGPT kind of burst on the scene. But actually, AI is pattern matching that's been around since the 70s and 80s. So it began, I used to use Microsoft Word, and it was amazing when you could run spell check at the end. And that was just doing some basic pattern matching. And then the, computing power was able to do that faster, and we started to get predictive completion. So, you started typing REC, you probably meant receive. And then, computer power got faster and it started to say, "Oh, you meant receive a free gift with purchase." And now we've got really fast machines with lots and lots of data, and so it can predict, paragraphs and write pictures. It's just an evolution of things that we've had with us all along.
Yeah. Well, and I'm going to add like autocorrect, it gets stuff wrong sometimes.
Absolutely.
Oh boy. Okay. So let's see. So the subtype enough about AI. And so I love that you had like you're trying to make sure that leaders stay relevant because we cannot hand over everything to bots and let bots run the world. Like that's just a disaster. By the way, I saw that movie. So I'm drawn to the subtitle of your book, which is the Reclaim Your Time and Expand Your Humanity. Most AI books are about efficiency and automation only. And then you kind of went the other direction. And I'm imagining that there was a communication PhD. There was a very intentional reason why.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So, early in my management career, I had someone tell me, you need to delegate work to the lowest cost resource that's capable of doing the job effectively. And that meant, as a sales leader, just like your CROs at that turning point. I don't have to be the one to go on every deal. I can, empower one of my team members to do it. And they don't have to be the one who researches every account. They had BDRs and SDRs that could go do some of that work. with AI, it's great at pattern matching. And so I think AI is the new lowest cost resource to do a lot of repetitive data manipulation, all of those sorts of things. At the same time, there's uniquely human parts about selling: empathy, trust building, perspective taking, consensus building that only people know how to do. And so when we bring AI into the sales organization, yes, we're going to get really efficient when we delegate a lot of mindless tasks to AI. That leaves us more time to do our uniquely human stuff. And then I think there's so much more I would say about this. A Salesforce study said that we're spending 72% of our time right now on non-selling tasks. AI creates a huge opportunity for us to reclaim that time and then really double down on this sort of interpersonal conversation that you and I are having today. Now we have to watch out because AI tools, because they're so good at pattern matching, might trick you into thinking that they're your therapist or they're your friend. They have learned the pattern that I say I'm having a really tough day, and you say, "Gosh, I'm so sorry. I hope tomorrow's better for you, and what can we do about it?" But we have to remember that that's just a response and a predict the next syllable trick. It really doesn't have this theory of mind to know what we're talking about. And in a sales cycle, we really need a physical human on the other side to have that connection with you. And so that's really what Reclaim Your Humanity is all about when we talk about this.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's a get out of my head moment because that's what I will tell people constantly. It's like, no AI BDRs, please. No AI calling. No, none of that. There are certain things that you cannot or should not delegate to the bot. Just because the technology exists to do it does not necessarily mean that it's a good idea.
I absolutely agree. Cloning technology is getting really good. I can say a couple hundred words into a microphone and an AI bot can, use my voice. And of course, I'm all over the internet. So you can send an AI bot to say, what's JD likely to answer in these questions? But we really don't want a virtual JD. On the other hand, if you're going to interview JD, all of this data about me is on the internet. And so it's really easy to go get prepared and have a bot go, find all the information and learn about that food sanitation license. I don't know where you found that, but, potentially, prep a salesperson with those
Yeah,
kind of little
sure.
details that are going to make that interpersonal connection and make you better when you sit down and have the conversation.
Yes. So A, you figured out my trick. I have Podcast Bot. Podcast Bot knows exactly the type of conversations that I like to have, which are, hey, find out what this person is talking about and figure out what else we can ask them because I am not here to produce oh, here's what I go on a lot of podcasts. Here's what I usually talk about. Okay, perfect. We are not going to talk about that.
That's right.
And then when I build, I leave an AI me with every client that I work with at the end of that engagement. And one of my clients calls it like he has a sales coach in his pocket. Like I'm not a coach, but still
Yeah.
coaching is part of what I do. And it's like all my stuff is in there. And then prepare the conversation, do the research, do that mundane stuff that salespeople take time to do, the admin part of the job. And the interesting thing I didn't predict was that they start running faster sales meetings because they're not starting with the same stuff, like the get to know you
Yep.
stuff. The first person that I did this with, he said he cut his sales meetings in time by like a third. And it was because he's starting in the middle of the conversation because the bot did all the research and he didn't have to ask all that other stuff. How
And the
long have you been
prospect
in
must love
business?
that.
This and that. Yes, yes, because when you schedule 30 minutes and you're done in 20, I love it.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So, yay. Let's see. So, speaking of AI adoption, quick pause. The questions I ask when I'm on this show, the topics we talk about, these are the same things I see when I run diagnostics and retainers for growth stage companies. Why is revenue stuck? What's breaking? What should leadership own to fix it? What should you do most importantly now? What should you do, but it's less urgent and you can do it later? Most leaders think they need more leads, more pipeline, maybe even another salesperson. But the real issue is usually revenue architecture. Sales, marketing, customer success, and partnerships, They're all drifting apart or they're not systemized. This is what my diagnostic uncovers, and it's custom to your business. I don't bring the same deck to every company. Growth is way too nuanced for that. If you've been listening to the show and thinking, I'm not sure what's costing us revenue, I'm not sure exactly what to do, that is what my diagnostic is for. DM me on LinkedIn if that might be useful to you. All right, back to the conversation. I see, at least from my lens, a massive variation. I see people who have agents and who are using custom trained GPTs and like AIs everywhere. And then I see others who are like, the board wants us to do AI. And then there's everything in between. But I think the one constant is that like everyone is feeling pressure to do AI and keep up. So for any sales org that still feels like they haven't really adopted it, even though, it's everywhere, where should they start? And how do they avoid chasing every shiny new tool that shows up in their LinkedIn feed?
So I think you shouldn't feel badly if you haven't started. There was a research study came out last December in 25, which said really about 80% of American workers have not used AI in their job yet. And so I think a lot of times, tech salespeople, we're talking about it constantly, but most of the American workforce isn't there yet. And so, number one, I think we need to recognize that we're still building our digital literacy. Now, salespeople, I do think are ahead of that curve, and we see more salespeople experimenting with things. I talk a lot in the book about sort of the maturity model that says, let's start with some really simple level one kind of pilots that if you've never touched an AI tool, here are some simple, low risk, low stakes tasks that can get you just used to, someone proofreading my email or doing some basic account research. When you've got that, then all of a sudden we also deal with all the cultural issues about is AI going to put me out of a job and all of that sort of stuff. But then you can start having an organizational conversation about where are the things that are just pattern recognition that a tool can do really well, and where are the parts of our job that are uniquely human that we have to keep a human in the seat for? And then we can start to put together, these like level two, sorts of more sophisticated deployments. And eventually people imagine this level three world where, it's agentic and there's a virtual, JD and SDR and all these things that are going off. Are we ever really going to get there? Probably not. That's probably like what the .com was. But I think there are some sort of basic agents that we can, you know, send a bot out to say, go read this contract and you already know my fallback positions on all the clauses. So go ahead and draft that. The trick though is we still have to keep humans in the loop because we're starting to see places where, AI chatbots offer discounted airline tickets or offer, cars for $1 because they're really helpful, and the law says, if you've put that bot out there to act on your behalf, you have to hold up your end of the bargain there. And so there's always going to be a place where, the bot isn't going to run totally on its own. I think the hard work is having a governance committee that helps you figure out where and when those trade-offs happen.
Like that. I want that dollar car, by the way. We're on the
It's a
market for a
Chevy
new car.
Tahoe, a brand new Chevy Tahoe. Had been, the bot had been taught like be an agreeable, happy colleague, and
Love that.
someone said the most agreeable thing for me is I'd like this new car for $1.
Wow. Yeah. So I think that we talk a lot about human in the loop, and where I land and when I'm working with a client is like it has to be human led and human reviewed. You can let
Yes,
the bot do some things in the middle and speed things up, but your output, your input, your prompting, your like human brain and your insights, like that's going to get good output, but then it gets stuff wrong all the time. So you got to edit that and then go back to it and be like, hey, you did it wrong.
absolutely. And I mean, I
Both
think there
like
are
a human sandwich.
that's right. And I think there are core things. We've already seen legislation. New York has it, Europe has it a lot. If you're using a bot to scan resumes or you're using a bot to, do some of these like performance reviews or help you, you know, a bot would be great to help me write a performance review. If I start and say, here's the things I've observed, and now edit my language and package it nicely. A bot is terrible at, go listen to every recording I've ever had with this person and come up with your own review on its own. So we're seeing a lot of legal landscape on that. But these are places where a human in the loop has got to be part of your process. And I think what you said earlier about, companies are telling people go deploy AI. There's this big Sequoia Capital, 2 years ago now, he called it the $200 billion question, and a year later he said now it's the $600 billion question. Is we have as a community spent $600 billion on developing AI tools, and we're looking for where's the ROI. What's really important is that we don't go off as a company and say, go do AI because you need to do AI. That's a tool in search of a problem. You've got to start exactly where you said is start with the people that are doing the jobs. Where is the bottleneck in your workflow? Where is the drudgery? Where is the pattern recognition and data manipulation that's no value add for you? And then think about, can AI make you more efficient by delegating that? And so if you start with the people and the problem and then apply the tool, I think you're going to have a much better result than look at me, my shiny new tool, and let's see where I can use it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And as transformative as AI is, I bring it back to automation and digital transformation. You look at, we're spending too much time on this. Let's figure out a way to be more efficient. And then maybe technology's the answer, and maybe it's not. Maybe you have redundant processes and people reviews and things like that internally. So, like, find the problem first. Yes, I love that. And I think I'm borrowing this from Gartner, where they suggested, like, find one, maybe three max problems and solve those instead of being like, we're going to AI everything. Like, no, no, no. Start with one or two or three at the most, build
Absolutely.
from there.
And have a governance council that has
Ooh.
representatives from all different voices at the table to help you think it through. Because
Mm,
as a CRO or a sales leader, of course I want AI to, help me get better customer relationships and win more deals and all of that kind of stuff. But when I start just the very first or the first two little touch points, all of a sudden I'm going to have cultural issues. My employees are going to have feelings about that. My customers are going to have feelings about that. We're going to make mistakes. The AI is going to hallucinate a contract term that doesn't exist. How do I want to resolve that? Legal's going to have something to say. So, yeah, I would be very afraid of someone who is not using AI today and says, tomorrow it's just going to be all these agents doing everything on your behalf. It's really a crawl, walk, run,
yes.
experiment, learn, listen, and then adjust.
Yeah. Well, and then I will add AI policies. You have to tell employees, you have to give them guide rails like, you can do this with AI, you cannot do that. Load the entire customer spreadsheet and have it run an analysis? Sure, but make sure you take the names out, right? Anonymize the data. I see way too many because there's so much pressure. Hurry up, but it's like, hold on, do you have an AI policy? Because if you don't have an AI policy and you're having employees do stuff, they're going to accidentally make a mistake and it's not going to be their fault because you didn't tell them that they couldn't load, social security numbers into the AI tool, right?
You're exactly right. And we have to make sure that policy committee is figuring out how to enable the organization. Because it's really easy to say, we got to watch out for leaking customer information, so we're not going to allow you to put any of that in a tool. And what do we know from social psychology? People find the path of least resistance. So if you as an organization aren't giving me a tool and showing me a good way to do it, well, then I'm just going to go get a free chat GPT or Gemini or whatever. And then we're really going to have a problem because I've loaded all of my customer stuff into, a public LLM where it's leaking and learning. So, we really need to know that that's a risk. But instead of saying no, get all the right voices to the table from IT and HR and legal to talk about not know, but how, and then guide people and teach people.
Yes, love that. Okay, so let's get back to the book. You lay out three levels of AI maturity in the book: foundational to fully enabled. For a founder at around 5 million ARR with a two-person sales team and no rev ops function, by the way, no client success, none of that. It's just they're still in their scrappy mode. Where should they realistically start? And what is the mistake that everyone sees at that foundational level?
Yeah. Well, I think the mistake is doing AI just because you think you're supposed to. You really do need to figure out what is the business problem that I'm trying to solve.
Mhm.
I was talking to a founder of a company that's maybe 7 million in revenue, so right around that
Mhm.
size. Exactly as you said, they don't have a RevOps function. What they learned, they got a private GPT. So again, protecting our data. But they learned that actually with their, four salespeople, they had a small enough sales org and they had a small enough customer base that they could just use a $20 a month GPT tool to do some basic analysis that a RevOps partner would do for them. And all of
Mhm.
a sudden, that founder finds himself being, a head of sales who's inspecting pipeline and creating really good forecasts and identifying risky accounts that are going to churn and doing some of that analysis that, a much bigger organization would, just have to hire someone to do, but get some basic things there. I think there's a lot of good content generation for, the small organization around, marketing campaigns. As I was writing the book, I did a test. I talked to AI about a company I worked for 15 years ago. And they are now out of business, so it made no difference, But I said, here's what the product is, here's what we're about. Our logo looked like this because we had this metaphor about this bird and all of this sort of stuff. Go create me a product slick. And in 4 minutes, I had a pretty good like opening PDF that laid out the main pain points, features, and it was branded kind of like what I had 15 years ago. And so then taking it a step further, now that you know something about this company, who are the top best prospects in Chicago that I should be calling on? And it found exactly the right people and, the right companies and the right people and the jobs. And here's their email addresses. Great. Now craft me a multi-touch email campaign and phone calling campaign. And, a little bit of back and forth in half an hour, I had a pretty credible marketing campaign where if I was a founder who knew nothing about marketing, had never done it before, you've got a good place to start with. Here's some messaging, multiple touches, some voicemails, some product collateral, some images. It even made a little 8-second video that, you know, wasn't terrible. Could show up on my website and be pretty good until I'm at my next revolution. And for $20 a month, it certainly is worth the cost.
Yes, that's how I started my company. It was, "Hold on, I can get Wix for $30 a month. I've got ChatGPT for 20. I have what's in my brain, like, I don't need an office. I don't need a lot of capital to start a business." I love that it's kinda leveling the playing field for people who might not have had an easy entryway into business ownership. And yeah, making smaller businesses a little more efficient and able to kinda parry with their larger competitors. I love that.
Yeah. I was talking to someone who said they run a card shop, and I expected them to say, I have no need, handmade cards, like paper and
Mm.
pens
Mhm,
and,
mhm.
beautiful, beautiful
Yes.
birthday cards. And I thought, oh, they're going to have no need for AI. And so we sort of got onto this topic, and she said, I use AI all day, every day, because it helps me, manage my inventory and look at customer patterns and, think about promotions and think about my email blasts, all of this kind of stuff. And then, you know what? Like, you're going to run a much more efficient card shop. And at some point, you're going to get to a place that you say, I've topped out on these tools, but hopefully the business is so much bigger and better. Then you're ready to start making some of the bigger investments in a real CRM system or a real inventory management or, whatever the rest of that stuff is going to be.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. I could talk all day about that. However, I wanna get into some juicy stuff. So PodcastBot found out that you are collecting AI sales fail stories right now, like real moments where AI got it completely wrong. I'm not going to want to steal any of your stories, but I do have one to tell myself if we have enough time. But what is the worst category of failure that you're seeing? I am curious about that.
Well, I'll give you a story, and then I would
Yes.
love to hear yours because I'm actually running a competition about this, and I'm going to be telling the story as part of my TED Talk too, which is coming up in April. It all began for me because I have this right outside the window. I have this little balcony rooftop garden where, it's very small. It's a mini grill. But during the pandemic, I entertained myself and I made a little Facebook page for it, an Instagram page for it. And I announced to my friends, the Chicago Bell Garden is the most exciting new bistro in Chicago. And a couple of days later, I get a phone call from a vegan meat producer, burger maker. And they saw a glamour shot that I had posted of something I was experimenting with on the grill. And they said, "Hey, we think you're using one of our competitors' products. How can we convince you to put our burger on your menu instead?" And so, I had to explain, "Hey, whatever bot you did, like I'm not a real restaurant." And I looked at the post and it only had like 3 likes from friends. But it didn't stop there. Suddenly my door was full of a case of vegan cookies, 5 pounds of kimchi, which, holy cow, that is a lot of pickled cabbage,
Yeah.
and 20 pounds of steak rub from a spice vendor in London. Now, all of these folks, their AI bot had completely misunderstood the joke because it's not a person. But they were making real business decisions to spend money sending, the Chicago Bell Garden all of these food samples and hope that, we'd start serving it to our customers as well. So
That's
that really, now that I'm writing this book too about AI, that really started the AI Sales Fail campaign. You can go to aisalesfail.com, tell me your story, and later on this summer, we're going to pick the best ones. You're going to get a free signed copy of my book, and you're going to get some spice rub too, because I've got a whole lot of it to give away.
Oh my god, I love that. That is so funny in so many different ways. Okay, so at my house, if you have too much kimchi, you put it on a taco. Like, I don't know what it is about Korean food, but it's really good on a taco. I'm from Southern California, so everything goes on a taco, but still, this is especially delicious. Oh my god, that's so funny. So my story, I should have gone first because it's nowhere near that funny.
It's okay. And the
Really?
truth is, though, when we start asking these questions, everybody has a story, which is
Yes.
really why I'm really excited about collecting them. And, definitely, I want to hear your story. And then you have to
That's
go to
super fun.
aisalesfail.com and
Yes.
tell it there too, because you might win some steak rub.
Yes, I am a prolific cook. I would love steak rub. So it's boring as compared. I was working with a scale up, well funded, scrappy startup. Like they're hoping to get to 1 million repeatable revenue. And so everything is duct tape and band-aids. But they had a really good list in their CRM, like huge, like 14,000 names or something like that. I have no idea how they begged, borrowed, and stole those, but like they hadn't been touched in like 2 years. I'm like, okay, we need to nurture these leads. So we got Zoom info and you're optimizing the data and you're enriching and all that good stuff. And then so you can personalize things in 2022 or 3 that you couldn't before. Little AI, little automation there. So I'm like, "Oh, yes, let's send out more personalized things." Everybody wants a personalized email. So long story short, ZoomInfo got a lot of stuff wrong. Um, and I forget what it was, but I do remember that the person that received it and it was like incorrect title or something like I'm not the fill in the blank anymore, but they were really fussy about it because they had gotten promoted. And the owner of the company wigged out. She's calling me, freaking out. The campaign's wrong. People are calling me, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, one email, one guy. By the way, you bought Zoom info, not me. So
And you got a
anyway, I
response.
paused it. And that's when I learned that high first name is about the level of personalization that I am going to let ZoomInfo or Apollo do because their data is not as accurate as they want to tell you that it is. Yeah.
Well, I mean, this comes back to human in the loop. I don't mind, a personalized email or that's a mail merged email going out. But what I'm seeing is a lot of like, hi Miller, because it's picked the wrong field, but also just personalization on stupid stuff. You know, hi JD. This is literally when I got. Hi JD. I see that you're a technology salesperson in the Midwest. I'm one too. We should have a phone call. And, again, like I get the personalization, like you must be in Iowa and who knows what you're trying to sell to me. If the BDR who's pushing the button on that can just do a quick scan, the AI probably has gotten 80% of them right and is going
Yeah.
to help them a whole lot. And then, do some quality check and pull out the ones that make no sense. And you can move from there. And it's
Yeah,
still way better than
you'll
the
find your
the
search.
BDR. Try and write all of them on their on their
Of course. I am a huge fan of leveraging technology to do the boring stuff. But you have to check it. And that was a fail on my, it was a new thing that Zoom Info came out with, I think, and it was big on like, okay, we're going to nurture this database because when people get a promotion, we're going to congratulate them, or when they
That's
get a
right.
new job, or it was all about building out the buying group because it was enterprise sales and things like that. So I was like, oh my God, we can use all this. No, hi first name.
Hi, summer.
Gosh, yes.
Hi, winter.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I don't ever get that. Boy, okay. So, I have one last question for you and then we'll wrap it up. So I heard about a TED Talk. You've advised dozens of private equity companies. You've now written 2 books. There's All the Feeding of the Homeless People and the Food Sanitation License. I'm curious now, like, what is left on the bucket list? Like, what haven't you done?
So, I really want to get back to health and fitness.
Mm,
It began earlier on. I said, I get excited about something and I go really deep. And I had never been an exerciser. And then in my late 20s, I discovered marathon running and, I ran a marathon and that was exciting. And then I wanted to do more. And then I did triathlon and all of a sudden I did Ironmans and 3 Ironmans and, all of
Jesus.
this. And then I completely stopped. So, and that food license manager still cooking a lot of, chocolate and all those things. So we put on a bit of weight. So my bucket list isn't a new thing, but it's a return to the roots. I'm getting back into running. I've gotten an ad for an AI powered water bottle that apparently is going to tell me when I'm thirsty. But I'm just trying to get out on the lakeshore of Chicago this summer and get back to health and fitness.
Nice. I love that. My gosh. I can picture my run along the lake in Chicago. Like, I live in Southern California, so it's a lot of hills. And it was like, oh my God, there's a body of water and it's flat.
Chicago
I
running's
ran like eight
amazing.
miles that day. That was
Chicago
beautiful.
running is amazing because of how flat it is, and we're just
Yeah.
about to get to the season where it's nice to be out. She
Oh my
started the
gosh.
started the season. We have a half marathon. It's called the Triple F half F with the little cube, and it means like the freaking frozen, half marathon. And so that's cold in February. Oh, that's probably the other F. That's cold. We were out there in snow and ice and 20 degrees. But now it is starting to warm up and just be a wonderful summer out there.
I love that. Okay. You do that. Go run a marathon or something. Goodness gracious. Overachiever much? Okay. Well, JD, let's wrap this up. Thank you for joining me and sharing your insights and your goofy stories. This is going to make for a really fun episode. So thank you. I'm
Thanks
going to
for having
link
me.
your LinkedIn, your website, your TED Talk, all of that in the show notes so that folks can watch the TED Talk and that they can grab your book. And for those of you listening in the gym or the car, I appreciate you too. And I will see you all next week.
Have a good one.
And that